Last year, I had a neighbor who was also my friend. She'd been my friend since I was 2 years old. Her name is Jalissa. Her mom and grandmother were also very close with my parents. Of course, my parents sometimes said they were jealous and even a bit racist, but despite that, we used to go to places together and even take trips as families. It all started in May of last year. I began to feel like Jalissa was avoiding me at school. I brushed it off at first. Around that time, my dad's car suddenly broke down. He called a mechanic who lived nearby, and although the repair took a whole week, the car still wasn't fixed. Then, a second car broke down too. Since my dad couldn't work, things became really difficult for us. That's when the neighbor next door offered to take my dad's car to his garage and fix it. He test drove it and even went pretty far, and it seemed perfectly fine. But that night, I was looking out the window, watching my dad drive home. The moment the car pulled into our front yard, it stopped. It had broken down again. My dad was shocked. Everyone thought it was strange. The neighbor took the car back again and attempted to fix it once more, but another week passed and we had no money left. My dad went to see someone named Ro Ko, who was a psychic. What that person told him completely shocked him. I didn't know anything about it for a few days. A few days before my exams, my parents took me somewhere and I could tell something was wrong between them. But they left me sitting in the car. Later, I found out it was the psychic's house. Through the window, I saw a red candle and flowers placed on a desk inside. My mom told me it was a sacred place. We went back to see the psychic a few more times. Afterward, my dad asked me, "Do you know why we went there?" I said no. Then he told me, "The reason we went is because your best friend Jalissa's mom poured a dead person's bodily fluids into our front yard. It was terrifying. She's been trying to break our family apart since 2015. That's why your mom's foot hurt back then. And in 2019, when my foot hurt and I had to go to the hospital, that was because of her too. She's done all kinds of things. In February 2024, she sprinkled liquid from a corpse she got from a mortuary into our yard. She was trying to make your mom and me fight and go crazy so we'd break up. She wanted to be with me. She always thought we were wealthy. The reason I had to go to the hospital for surgery was because of her. She put a curse on your mom, but your mom is strong." My dad looked terrified. He said she poured a strange, sticky liquid in our yard to let evil spirits into our home. She believed that if my dad stepped on it, his legs would rot. For 9 years, day and night, she had done all kinds of things. All my parents' fights and problems, he said, were because of her jealousy. Now the psychic Ro Ko has given us something protective to bury in our yard. But my dad still has nightmares every night that Jalissa's mom and her new boyfriend are plotting something. Our family is doing well now, but we don't talk to Jalissa's family anymore. And I don't keep in touch with Jalissa either. Sometimes I miss her because she used to be my friend, but I think things are better this way. Hi Wanzi, I've been a fan of your channel since I was in 9th grade, and now I'm a college student. I wanted to share a really mysterious experience I had. You can call me Rini. I live in India, and back then we moved often because of my dad's job. Eventually, he was transferred to Dehradun, the capital of Uttarakhand. Dehradun is known for its lush greenery, pleasant weather, and relatively safe environment, so my parents quickly fell in love with the city and we ended up living there for quite a while. That's where I experienced something truly strange. This happened in 2016, when I was in 4th grade, right at the start of summer vacation. One day, my friend, who I'll call S, came over because her parents were busy with work. We were extremely bored and just wandering around the garden with nothing to do. That's when we noticed something large flying in the sky. It was glowing and looked pure white. At first, I thought it was just an insect, but when I looked more closely, it looked like a tiny human figure. I could hardly believe what I was seeing. It honestly resembled a fairy, with a thin, almost fragile-looking body and very large wings that appeared slightly worn. If I had to guess, it was probably around 13 or 14 inches tall. I thought I must be hallucinating, but then my friend said she could see it too. We both screamed at the exact same time. We were so startled that we pinched each other to make sure we weren't dreaming. When we quickly grabbed a phone and opened the camera to take a picture, it had already disappeared. The memory is still incredibly vivid to this day. I even drew a sketch of what I remember it looking like. To this day, we still have no idea what it was. There's a story that still haunts me to this day. My name is Brian, and I'm from Sarawak, Malaysia. This happened exactly 10 years ago when I was still in college. The three of us, me, Hafiz from Johor, and Mustaqim from Kuala Lumpur, went on a short trip to Penang during our mid-semester break. After we arrived, we spent the day wandering around and sightseeing. That's when the incident happened. That night, the three of us were walking back to a Rama Villa apartment we had rented for our vacation, smoking as we went. Near the stadium, there's a famous spot called the Pasar Road Walk in Lowak. On the way to the apartment, there's a small bridge called the P. Ramlee Bridge. As we were walking and about to pass that bridge, we suddenly heard branches rustling above us. As we got closer, we could see it more clearly. It looked like some kind of monkey, but its body was pitch black, its eyes were red, and it had 4 arms and 2 legs. It was eating something, then it dropped whatever it was holding and suddenly stared straight at us before chasing us. We ran as fast as we could. Somehow, all 3 of us managed to escape, and after that night, we never passed through that area again after dark. But that wasn't the end of it. The next day, when we were leaving the apartment to head to campus, we saw the creature run away after dropping a dead cat onto the hood of my friend's car. We were completely shocked. What was it? How did it know which car belonged to us? And where had we parked? It was as if it could smell us. The 3 of us agreed to keep what happened a secret between us because there was no way to explain what that creature was. During my senior year of high school, there was this kid. Let's call him Jonathan. He was in 11th grade, and people had this strange nickname for him, the Freshman Killer. If you knew, you knew. It unsettled me to say the least. I found out about it because one of my friends, let's call him Kay, was in the same grade as Jonathan and lived on the same block as me. I wasn't friends with Jonathan, though. Every morning, Kay and I would take the same bus, and Jonathan would always dap us up. But there was something off about him. He had this creepy, unnerving look in his eyes. Not wanting to seem rude, I reluctantly returned the dap, masking the discomfort I felt. During lunch, I often sat with Kay's brother, Josh. Jonathan would always gravitate to our table, uninvited. We joked about it, calling him the Freshman Killer to his face, half laughing at how strange and inappropriate he seemed. Sometimes, we would tell him straight up that his behavior was weird. Eventually, Jonathan made this off-putting comment. "I don't hit on freshmen anymore, only sophomores and up." Like that somehow made it better. Josh and I were disgusted, exchanging glances filled with repulsion. Time went on, and I convinced Kay and Josh to distance themselves from Jonathan. We gradually stopped talking to him, but it didn't stop Jonathan from lingering. He started showing up in my 7th period class, even though he wasn't enrolled in it. Other students said the same. He'd be seen in random classes, just sitting there. It was during this time that his name began circulating on the school's confession page. Accusations of him being a creep, a predator, worse, were posted for all to see. I was thoroughly repulsed by then, but something held me back from completely cutting ties. One thing about Jonathan always stood out, the guitar case he carried around. He claimed it was for band class, but something about it unsettled me. One day, in what I thought was a lighthearted joke, I blurted out, "He's got a gun!" mimicking a meme. Jonathan's face darkened. "Shut the hell up, dude," he muttered. I followed it up by joking, "Imagine if you actually had something in there." He didn't seem pleased, but we all laughed it off, thinking nothing more of it. I never imagined what the joke could become. Another time, I saw him with the guitar again and told him he should play something. He almost did, but before he could, the teacher called us to class. After that, I stopped talking to him altogether, and eventually, I graduated and left all that behind. Fast forward 4 months after graduation, and I saw a meme one of my friends posted. "Stay away from Jonathan Diddy Wells," it read. I chuckled, remembering how weird he'd been. Out of curiosity, I texted a friend who still attended the school. "Yo, do you know a guy named Jonathan Wells? People used to call him the freshman killer, right?" His response made my blood run cold. "Yeah, I know Jonathan. He's the one who threatened the school." I stared at my screen in disbelief. Then came the next message. He had a gun in his guitar bag. The weight of what he said sank in. My stomach churned. I had joked about that very thing. I had laughed it off, never once imagining it could be real. I couldn't help but replay that moment in my mind. The teacher stopping us before Jonathan took out the guitar. What if that teacher hadn't? What if Jonathan had unzipped that case? That thought still haunts me to this day. Knowing I might have helped brush off something so dangerous, something that could have turned into a nightmare, terrifies me in a way I will never forget. There was a park in my neighborhood that I used to go to pretty often. I've never really liked crowded places, and this park was usually almost empty, which made it perfect for walking alone and clearing my head. About 3 years ago, I went there for a walk late one night, probably around 11 or midnight. As I approached the entrance, I noticed 2 men standing there, staring at me. Something about the situation immediately felt off. That park was usually pretty empty, especially at night. If anyone was there, it was usually couples or people walking their dogs. So seeing 2 grown men just standing around doing nothing felt strange. Anyway, I started walking. The trail led past a small hill that connected to what was basically a wooded area, almost like a small mountain. At night, nobody really walked up there, and most of the lights were turned off, so it got pretty dark and honestly, kind of scary. Normally, I'd just walk around the outer paths and head back, but that night, I felt like walking a little farther in. As I was walking, I suddenly heard rustling coming from the woods. It startled me, and I looked over. There are usually small animals around there, so at first I assumed it was just that, but then I noticed something white in the darkness. I turned on my phone flashlight and pointed it toward the sound, and that's when I saw them. Several men were staring directly at me. Their heads were almost level with the ground, like they were lying flat or crouched down. I instantly got chills. I pretended like I hadn't seen anything and just kept walking past them. But as I continued walking, something started bothering me. For a split second, I thought I'd seen someone's bare foot between their faces. It happened so fast that I convinced myself I must have imagined it. I felt a strong urge to turn around, but I didn't, because I had this overwhelming feeling that if I looked back at them, something bad would happen. The only sound I could hear was my own footsteps. It was completely silent. No insects, no wind, nothing. Even without turning around, I somehow knew they were still there, watching me in that same prone position. I left the area as quickly as I could and took the long way back home. I debated calling the police, but the situation felt vague. What if they were just messing around in the woods? I didn't want to overreact. So I went home and eventually fell asleep. That night, I had a dream. In the dream, I was walking through the same park again, and from inside the woods, a man was running toward me, except he only had an upper body, no lower half. He was crying while staring directly at me. I woke up, gasping for air, my heart pounding like crazy. I could clearly remember his face, but I had no idea who he was. The next day, I finally reported what I'd seen to the police. They said they would check the area, but I never heard back from them. When I went back to the park sometime later, there was no sign that anything had ever happened. There was no disturbance. I was too afraid to go deep into the woods. And honestly, after that night, I stopped going to that park altogether. It's still a mystery to me what happened there that day. I was 10 years old when this happened. My mother had gone to a wedding with her sisters, and it was already past 1 a.m., but she hadn't come home yet. Back then, I couldn't sleep without her around. I kept waiting, my young mind restless, the silence of the night stretching on. Cell phones weren't common in the 90s, so I had no way to contact her. Unable to stay inside any longer, I stepped out into the gallery of our house. A tall fence enclosed it, with bars running along the upper section. I dragged a chair over, climbing onto it so I could peer over the gate, hoping to catch sight of my mother returning. The street outside was eerily quiet, completely swallowed by the night. Minutes passed, nothing. Then, out of nowhere, my father appeared behind me. His sudden presence startled me. "Go to bed," he said.
"I'll wait,"
I replied stubbornly. He sighed and said, "Fine, I'll wait with you." Just then, the front gate creaked open. My breath hitched, but there was no one there. The air felt thick, oppressive. My father and I stood frozen, staring, and then a figure stepped forward, a masked man. He moved with a strange calm, his presence almost unnatural. A firearm glinted in his hand, and then he fired multiple shots at someone behind him. The gunshots shattered the stillness of the night, echoing down the empty street. My father and I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. We weren't just witnessing something horrific, we were a part of it now. Then, as if sensing us, the masked man slowly turned his head and looked right at us. A wave of terror unlike anything I had ever felt gripped me. He had seen us, we had seen him, and he knew it. Without hesitation, he raised his gun and fired in our direction. Time slowed. My mind went blank. I felt like my life was flashing before my eyes. Before I could even react, my father grabbed me, yanked me off the chair, and rushed me inside. The door slammed shut behind us. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. We immediately called the police. My mother arrived 30 minutes later, and soon after, the authorities followed. They searched the area, questioned people, but they found nothing. No masked man, no body, no signs of gunfire, nothing. It was as if he had never been there. But I know what I saw. My father saw it too. Who was the masked man? Who, or what, was he shooting at? I still don't know, and maybe I never want to. Hello, my name is Amelia, and I'm 17 years old now. This happened when me and my best friend Flora were 13. We grew up in a small village in the UK and spent that summer hanging out in the local, slightly secluded park with our friends Callie, Adam, and Tommy. Telling this story still gives me chills. This was in the summer of 2020, the height of COVID-19, when hardly anyone was outside. Flora, Callie, and I rode our skateboards every day and knew the park's hidden spots like the back of our hand. As summer went on, we started noticing a tall man in his late 50s, gray hair, yellow-tinted biking glasses that made his face look sunken, and deep red gloves. He was unmistakable. He rode a bike on the gravel trail that looped the park, and we kept seeing him at the same time every day when we met up. The first time he approached us, he said, "Hi, kids. I've seen you playing around here quite a lot recently." Flora and I jumped. Callie and the boys turned to face him. His voice was low. "Are you having fun?" he asked. We nodded. He waved and rode away, saying, "I'll see you around." A few days later, we tried to ignore him, thinking he was just an odd, lonely local. Then Adam swore he saw camera flashes and yellow-tinted glasses in the bushes, and that reminder made us uneasy. Not long after that, he sat on a bench across the field with a camera around his neck, smiling and waving at us. He called out, "I'll see you later," and we hurried home that evening. The next morning, we messaged in our group chat, terrified that he might be taking pictures at the park. Flora and I decided to hang out at her house instead. On the walk to the corner shop to grab lunch, we looked up and froze. There he was, walking out of the shop, carrying groceries in his red, gloved hands. Without greeting us, he said,
See you very soon, girls.
His grin stretching impossibly wide before he rode away. Petrified, we sprinted back to Flora's, locked the door, and messaged the others to come over. Soon, everyone arrived and we barricaded ourselves in the living room with blankets and sleeping bags. We tried to watch movies and joke around, but the fear kept us on edge. Around 10 p.m., while the house was quiet and rain drummed outside, Flora and I stayed awake, whispering under the covers. Then, faintly at first, we heard bicycle bells, and then tires and brakes screeching outside our front door. Tears pricked my eyes. We woke up everyone. From the other side of the door came frantic, hard knocking and a low voice.
See you inside.
The pounding got louder and angrier. Adam whispered, "Where is a phone?" Callie crawled across the floor and grabbed Tommy's phone. Tommy dialed. We heard every knock like it was trying to break the wood. We all clung together, crying, as the knocking continued and then suddenly stopped. Police arrived not long after. We opened the door and let them in. They asked questions and searched the village that night, but there was no trace of him. He was never found. He's become Red Glove Man in our town, a name we'll never forget, and a story that still sits at the center of every summer memory we have. Hi, I wanted to share something that happened to me many years ago, something I've never really forgotten. I'm from Ecuador, and when I was in high school, my family and I lived in a small apartment building. There were only 4 apartments, and everyone kind of knew each other. One night, a girl from the last apartment, who lived with her father, knocked on our door. She had run away because her father had gotten violent during an argument. My parents let her stay the night. That evening, while my dad was asleep, she sat with my mom and sister in the living room. They were trying to comfort her, but then she said something that made the air grow cold. She told them that a few nights earlier, she had seen someone, or something, in the neighboring apartment. A man, she called it. But this man was completely black, like a shadow made of darkness itself. No face, no features, just a solid black shape standing still, watching. We tried to brush it off as stress or imagination, but deep down, something didn't feel right. A few nights later, my twin brother and I were in bed. We shared a room, even the same bed, and we were lying back to back. I started breathing loudly to annoy him, just a dumb habit, but he quickly hit me with his elbow and said, "Stop it, let me sleep." I smirked, pretending innocence, but then we both heard it, heavy breathing. It wasn't mine, and it definitely wasn't his. He hit me again, harder this time.
I said stop it.
But I whispered back, "It's not me." And then we froze. The breathing didn't stop. It was slow, deep, and right behind us, as if someone was standing next to our bed, leaning down over us in the darkness. We didn't move. We didn't speak. The only thing we could do was pull the blankets over our heads and call out for our mom. She rushed in, turned on the lights, but of course, no one was there. We told her everything, and even though she tried to calm us down, I could see it in her face. She believed us, because maybe, just maybe, the thing the girl saw that night was real. This happened about 11 or 12 years ago. I was a college student working as a cook at a bar and restaurant, so I was probably between 20 and 22 years old. Typically, once we closed for the night, my coworker and I would hang out and talk for a while at the kitchen entrance of the building. One night, I was driving back to my parents' house, where I was living while in school. I remember it was slightly chilly and somewhat foggy. It's usually about a 15-minute drive. It was after 3 a.m., and it had been a long shift, so about 3 to 5 coworkers and I hung out for a while after work before heading out. I was in the last 3 minutes of my drive. I had to turn right, go over a bridge, and my street was the second one down. When I was about halfway across the bridge, I saw something in the distance. I couldn't make it out just yet, but I figured it was some sort of animal crossing the road. Once I got over the bridge, my eyes couldn't look away from what I was seeing. It was a deer crossing the road, but only the upper half of its body was there, dragging itself across the pavement with no lower half at all. Deer are pretty common in my area, and where I lived, there were still some wooded areas left after new houses were built. This was a main road, and semi-trucks do occasionally pass through, though it's a bit out of the way from the nearest highway exits. The deer had been cut clean in half, its lower half was gone, and it dragged itself off the road before it eventually met its end. I moved too quickly to possibly hit it and put it out of its misery, and honestly, the deer was very big. I'm 6'3" and about 250 pounds at the time, and it was still a large animal. The next day, I went on a run before getting ready for work. I wanted to check the area near the bridge to see if the deer had made it to the field nearby. But when I got there was nothing. No blood on the road, no other half, not even a trace of the deer. This isn't necessarily a scary horror story, but it was one of the most graphic and unsettling things I've ever come across. Whenever someone brings up creepy or disturbing experiences, this is always the story I tell. This happened in the middle of November 2023. I was 17. It was just after a snowstorm. The streets were silent, covered in fresh snow, and the sky hung low with gray clouds. Me, Julian, Dylan, Logan, Josiah, Bobby, carrying a literal axe like it was Skyrim, and Carlos, we were just out walking around town, doing dumb shit, like usual. We had just been at school and got chased off by security. Hearts still racing, we stumbled onto a snow-covered trail that none of us had ever really noticed before. No footprints, no tire tracks, just an untouched path leading toward the ocean, lined with tall, bare trees. It felt like something out of a movie, so we followed it. At the end of the trail, tucked away in the woods, was this old shed. It looked abandoned as hell. Half the paint was chipped off, the windows fogged with condensation, the wood all weathered and gray. The whole area was dead silent. No birds, no wind, nothing, just us. Julian and I were the first ones to walk up to it. There wasn't any weird smell. No dead animal stench or anything, just cold, still air. We tried the door, but it was frozen shut. It didn't budge. That's when Dylan, Josiah, and Logan caught up with us. They were hanging back at first, just taking a break, but eventually we all circled the shed. There was a window on the right side, kind of high up. Dylan managed to slide it open and crawled in first. Logan followed him. Josiah was getting ready to go in next. That's when we saw it. Something, or someone, peeked at us from behind the shed. It was a human-like shape, but there was white fur, or maybe pale skin, around its head. Doberman-style ears, big, dark-rimmed, human-like eyes that didn't look right. They didn't reflect light like animal eyes usually do. They just watched. Julian froze, then he blurted,
Shit! A dog! A dog! A dog!
I saw it too, but it wasn't a dog. It had the wrong shape. Too tall, too upright, too aware. Josiah didn't wait. He turned and sprinted like his soul left his body. Logan hadn't seen it yet, but seeing our reaction was enough. He jumped out the window, landed on his stomach with a thud, and I'll never forget the words he shouted as he hit the ground.
Dude, that ain't no dog.
Then he was gone, took off straight into the trees. Dylan was halfway out the window at that point, struggling, legs flailing. He looked out, caught a glimpse, and just yelled,
What the hell?
He gave up trying to squeeze out, turned back inside, and kicked the door down from the inside. The door flew open and he ran like his life depended on it, probably because it did. Me and Julian ran too, but we were laughing. That's how we deal with scary stuff. We laugh. But then Julian slipped on a patch of ice and face-planted into the snow. He laughed for a second, but when he looked back at the shed, his face changed, stone-cold serious. He got up and bolted past me, Carlos, and Bobby, who were standing near the trail entrance. We regrouped and took the trail back to the bridge. There was a tunnel under where we sometimes hung out. We were catching our breath, trying to figure out what had just happened. Julian couldn't even talk. He was pale and shaking. Logan tried to explain everything to Bobby, Carlos, and Josiah, who hadn't seen it clearly. Dylan had seen it too, but he barely said a word. He was still trying to make sense of it. 1 year later, in the summer of 2024, a few of us, me, Julian, Bobby, and Carlos, decided to go back. We found the shed again, but it was different, bigger, renovated, new wood panels, no condensation, fresh paint. The old creepy energy was gone, replaced by something colder, emptier, but deeper. We didn't stick around long. I'm 19 now. Time moves on. Life keeps going. But that night still sticks with us. Julian doesn't talk about it much. Dylan never did. Logan makes jokes about it, but he remembers too. We all do. And the one thing that still plays in my head when I think back to that moment, the image of that thing peeking out and Logan's voice echoing in my mind.
Dude, that ain't no dog.
Hello, my name is Rian. I'm a girl, and this experience isn't mine. It happened to my sister. I'm currently 17 years old. This situation happened when my sister was very young, about 5 or 6. It was our relative's birthday party. At that time, I wasn't born yet. My sister and I have a 5-year age gap. While people were enjoying the party, casually eating and celebrating my relative's birthday, my sister approached my dad and said,
"Dad, who was that green figure in the house?"
My dad was confused and asked what figure she meant. She told him,
"It's a guy. He looks green and his body has muscles, but he doesn't have a head."
Everyone who heard it was suddenly terrified. How could a young girl say something like that? My dad is a very religious person, someone who believes he has a deep relationship with God. Because of that, he stayed calm. He believed my sister and asked her to point where the figure was. My sister pointed toward the top of the stairs. My dad gently told her it was nothing so she wouldn't be scared, since she was far too young to see something like that. Then he tried to distract her and let her go back to enjoying the party. While my sister was telling me this story, she explained that the house had been built in the 1980s, so it was already pretty old. She also said the house always felt dark and creepy. Even when the lights were on, it somehow still felt dark, like the place carried an uncomfortable feeling that never went away. She told me she would never forget what she saw that night because she still remembers it exactly the same way. This happened when my father moved from quarter number 3 to quarter number 5. The 5th building was located right beside a huge park. It was a large park where children had stopped playing, or if they did play, it was only in the far corner. Most people avoided the park, and even the tall, stout watchmen who roamed the quarters at night were afraid to go near it. One night, at around 2 in the morning, my dad woke up and saw my grandmother standing by the window watching something outside. He tried to ask her what was happening because he could tell something wasn't right. My grandmother told my father to stay quiet and pointed her finger toward the park. In the distance, what my father saw gave him chills for the rest of his life. He saw a seesaw going up and down, and the swings moving back and forth all by themselves. My father watched in horror as the swing and the seesaw continued their ghostly motion. Later, people said that a Christian family had lived in the quarters a few years earlier and had a young child. The boy was mischievous and spent most of his days playing in that same park. One day, while he was playing there, a terrible accident happened. The seesaw came down and fatally struck him in the head. This story truly scared both my father and me. Since that incident, the large park that was once full of people has remained strangely quiet. And sometimes, the only sound you can hear is the slow creaking of the seesaw and the swings moving in the empty park. I'd like to share a scary story that my aunt told me about my grandma. For some context, this story took place back in Vietnam not too long after the Vietnam War. My grandma was 6 years old and lived in a very old house. The house had been built over an area where many people died. Back then, Vietnam was a very poor country, and people didn't always have the time or resources to find and bury all the bodies after the war. Some were simply left where they fell, and houses were later built over the land where they had died. One night, my grandma attended a family gathering. Relatives had gathered in her house to celebrate and chat. My grandma, being a child, went off to play with her cousins and mind their own business. After a while, her uncle called for my grandma, but she didn't come. She was missing. After a few minutes of calling her, her relatives started to worry. When they asked her cousins where she was, they said they didn't know. Everyone quickly began searching everywhere for her. Almost an hour passed before her uncle finally found her, crouched behind a door. He asked her why she didn't answer when he called her. She slowly looked at him with bloodshot eyes. Then she replied in Vietnamese,
"How dare you speak to me like that? Do you know how old I am compared to you?"
Her voice was not her own. It sounded that of a grown woman. Her uncle tried to talk to her and reasoned with her, but she kept shouting at him in a crazed manner. Worried, her relatives reached out to a shaman. He was very old and had apparently rid people of spirits and possessions his entire life. He took one look at my grandma and immediately frowned.
"This child is possessed by a very old spirit,"
he said.
"If we do not remove the spirit, her soul will be lost forever."
The old man told her uncle to bring her to his home in the mountains at midnight, and then he left. Until then, my grandma just sat in the same corner, mumbling to herself. When the time finally came, her uncle tried to get my grandma to leave the house, but she resisted. It was as if the spirit knew what they were planning to do. It knew they were going to drive it out. Her uncle, with the help of several relatives, had to basically drag my grandma to the shaman's house. She screamed the whole way and refused to walk. But when they reached the shaman's yard, my grandma suddenly started moving on her own. She slowly began walking inside the house on her knees. The spirit was clearly trying to resist. It was as if some invisible force was pulling her into the house. When they got inside, the shaman told them that the spirit was very powerful. He said he was already old and weak, and if he performed the exorcism, he might die. But the shaman was willing to do it anyway. According to him, he had spent his entire life doing this work, and letting my grandma die now would make his life's work meaningless. My grandma was placed in the middle of the room. Papers covered the walls, each one with strange symbols written on them. She remained on her knees. In front of her was a long sheet of paper that stretched across the floor toward the shaman. At each corner of the room, there were small piles of salt. The old man told the spirit to leave my grandma's body, then began mumbling words that no one understood. Suddenly, the papers on the wall caught fire and started burning. The salt in the corners of the room turned black. My grandma began moving forward on her knees, slowly approaching the shaman. The long paper in front of her started burning as she moved. When she finally reached him and the last paper burned away, she suddenly collapsed and fell unconscious. After that night, she was never possessed again, but the shaman died shortly afterward. My grandma says she doesn't remember anything that happened that night, but all of her relatives insist that it's true, and they say they witnessed everything themselves. Apparently, after the incident, my grandma gained what they call a third sense. She could supposedly feel when spirits or strange energies were nearby, and whether they were good or bad. Honestly, I don't know much about spiritual things, but while my aunt was telling me this story, I kept getting goosebumps the entire time. This happened back in 2019 when my family moved to a small rural town in Pennsylvania. The move happened pretty suddenly because of my dad's job, and the house we moved into was an old standalone place, right next to the woods. For a while, everything was completely normal, until one day, we heard the sound of glass shattering coming from the attic. We all froze and gathered underneath the attic entrance. my dad grabbed a baseball bat and slowly climbed up to check it out. We searched the entire attic, but couldn't find anything unusual. The only thing wrong was the broken window. There were no signs of forced entry, no footprints, nothing. After coming back down, he looked unusually serious and said to my mom, "The way the glass broke, it kinda looks like someone smashed it from inside the attic and went out." My mom immediately went pale and told him that made no sense. If someone had climbed out through the attic window, there should have been marks on the roof or around the house, but there was absolutely nothing. We never figured it out. A few days later, I was walking down the hallway when I noticed the attic door slightly open. I called my dad again, and when he went up this time, there was a horrible smell, like a strong ammonia, almost like someone had urinated up there. But again, no signs of anyone being there, no stains, no evidence. At that point, my dad actually started suspecting me, telling me to stop messing around. I swear I hadn't done anything. That night, I noticed a document file on my computer desktop that I'd never seen before. When I opened it, there was only one sentence written inside: "A spirit pissed in the attic." I just sat there staring at it. Who the hell would even do something like this? I assumed my younger brother was pulling some stupid prank, so I confronted him. But he started crying, insisting he didn't do it. So then, who did? I almost typed back into the document asking, "What do you want?" But I stopped myself and just deleted the file. Things stayed quiet for a while after that. Then one day, my brother suddenly screamed. We found him collapsed beneath the attic entrance, crying hysterically. When my parents asked what happened, he said he saw someone through the slightly open attic door. He said it looked exactly like me, but its entire body was covered in white fur, and its mouth was stretched unnaturally wide across its whole face. According to my brother, it leaned toward him and whispered,
"Your brother is dead."
Then it smiled. My dad rushed up to the attic again, but, like every other time, nobody was there. My brother was shaking uncontrollably and had to be taken to the hospital. Thankfully, he wasn't physically harmed, but he suffered serious psychological effects for a long time afterward. After that, my dad permanently sealed the attic shut and locked it. Nothing major happened again after that. But one night, while I was outside, I looked up at the attic window and noticed something strange. It looked like a dim red light was glowing from inside. The problem was, there was nothing up there that could produce light. We didn't go up to check. The next day, the red glow was gone, and everything looked normal again. My dad even tried researching the history of the house, hoping to find out if something had happened there before, but he never found anything meaningful. This story takes place in the fall of 2022. Lakeside Park was about a 30-minute walk from my apartment, a beautiful park right next to a lake. I usually went there at night to walk. There weren't many people there, so I enjoyed the quiet alone. One night, I was sitting alone on a bench in the park, playing on my phone. The fog was thick and eerie, and I was watching a horror anime. Then, I heard someone walking. At first, I didn't pay attention, but suddenly, the air felt warm. I raised my head and looked at him, but I was a little surprised. There was something strange about his face. His eyes were very large, but the whites were very dark. His pupils were very small, and smoke was coming out of his pointed nostrils. At first, I thought it was cigarette smoke, but what struck me even stranger was that I'd seen his face somewhere before, but I couldn't quite remember who it was. For a moment, I wondered if I'd seen him in a movie before. I wondered if he was an actor from a horror film. I couldn't say anything, just staring at him. He slowly approached me, then stopped and stared intently. Smoke was still coming out of his nose, but it wasn't cigarette smoke. It was a thick gray. There was fog all around, but fog couldn't possibly be that gray. He just stared at me, and uncomfortable silence fell. Finally, he spoke.
"Doesn't my face look familiar?"
I answered, "Yes." And the moment I heard his voice, I felt a strange chill run down my spine. There was no reason. It was as if my nervous system instinctively sensed danger. And then he said,
It's a very nice day today. Peaceful, quiet, no one else around.
and smiled. I didn't know what to say, so I just smiled awkwardly. Then he said,
You still don't know who I am, but you will. You always do.
He said that, then smiled and continued to stare at me. Looking into his eyes, an inexplicable sense of discomfort and anxiety welled up inside me. I looked around, and it seemed like the man and I were alone in the thick fog. There was no one around. I suddenly became incredibly scared and started running. He yelled at me to stop, but I ran without looking back. The fog was so thick I couldn't see, but I kept running. At some point, I left the park, and when I looked back, he was gone. On my way home, I struggled for a long time to remember who he was, but I couldn't remember at all. Finally, when I got home, I felt a sense of relief. So I took a warm shower, and then, all of a sudden, a memory flashed through me like a bolt of lightning. He was a man who'd occasionally appeared in my dreams since I was little, and not just any dreams, but truly horrific dreams. He did some things to me in those dreams. One time, he stabbed me with something like a huge skewer and then roasted me over a huge bonfire. It was like a barbecue. The bonfire was so big it felt like a small mountain. And one day, he put me in a huge vat of boiling water, and underneath the vat, it felt like I could touch other people's hands or feet. I still remember vividly how real those feelings and the hot pain were. Every time that happened, I'd wake up screaming, run to my mom, and tell her about the dream. Then she'd come over with a Bible and pray for me. And another thing I remember is that in my dream, he had a tail, a very long, pointy tail. But when I saw him in the park that day, he didn't have a tail. The moment I remembered, I suddenly felt incredibly dizzy and collapsed on the floor. The next day, I went to a psychiatrist. The doctor listened to my story in silence and prescribed medication to reduce my anxiety. After that, I slowly regained my composure, and thankfully, the man hasn't appeared in front of me again. He hasn't appeared in my dreams either. But I'm afraid of when he'll show up again. But what scares me more than all the endless questions that keep popping up in my head? Who is he? And what does he want from me? Eventually, I came to a conclusion. He had come that day to take me to hell, because the lake was covered in thick fog that day, so much so that I couldn't even tell where I was standing. It felt like I wasn't even in this world. If I hadn't run away then, I think I would have vanished into that fog forever.